Kia ora te whare, kia ora koutou I tai mai ki te whakatina na tēnei kaupapa hohonu. Ka huri au ki tērā o ngā reo. With the committee's permission, I'd ask my friend Ms. Hira of our officers to start our submission, and then I will take us through. And I do want to leave some time to respond, because I think that we have a juxtaposition of opinion and an opportunity to explore that with the New Zealand initiative and Mr. Wilkinson's submission, I think, quite at odds with the Maori world's view, not just our firm's view, about the discriminatory effect of what has been proposed, both to tikanga Māori rights and interests and resources, and I think a narrowing of the property rights dimension, which would actually prevent compensation to Māori rights in water, for example, I think contrary not only to the principles of te tiriti o Waitangi, but also to the principles of fairness and justice, which are the underpinnings of the rule of law.
Tēnā rā koutou katoa, mo te tokoiti pea kāre I te mōhio ia Annette me ana mahi o te rā tō mātou umanga ture, he umanga ture kaupapa Māori mātou e kawe nei I ngā tikanga a kuima a koroma e mātou ana ki ngā ture Pākehā e mahi ana I te mahi hei paenga mō ngā whānau ngā hapu me ngā iwi maha o Aotearoa. Mātua rā kua mātou mahi he kōkiri I ngā take kia whakau ai te tika me te pono, kia rewa ake ai te mana o te hake, kia toitu ai te tiriti o Waitangi. Koe nei tā mātou tāpaitanga e whakahe marika ana ki tēnei piraura wātu, e kia nei te Regulatory Standards Bill. So we're a Māori law firm who specialise in advocacy for Māori in both kāwanatanga and rangatiratanga spheres. We operate in both the Pākehā legal system as qualified legal practitioners and in the Māori justice system as practitioners of tikanga. We provide a range of ture and tikanga related services on matters related to constitutional and public law, whenua Māori or Māori land law, and criminal defence. And we oppose this bill in its entirety and implore the select committee to recommend it be abandoned at the next reading. I was going to give a bit of an overview of our submission, but I think the volume of submissions in opposition to this bill that have already been presented to the select committee, we would be repeating. But just to highlight some of the key points from our submission, we think that it should not be lost on anybody that this is the fourth attempt to have this bill passed into law. It's the bill that just won't die. It's the most rejected, refiled, resurrected from the dead bill in the history of our country. And we think that we should be asking ourselves, at what point does this become an abusive process and procedural harassment? We echo all of the submissions that have said that this bill ushers in the corporatisation of our country and enables a neoliberal takeover of Aotearoa. And it is rooted in an ideology that promotes profits over people, money over manaakitanga, individual property rights over any other, and undermines the government's ability to safeguard collective and public interests. I am now going to hand it over to Annette because I think she wants to say some things in response or in light of the submissions that we've just heard.
Can I also, though, just draw, I have an uncomfortability of the way the submissions process has proceeded this week. I've just watched the New Zealand initiative and Mr. Wilkinson be given significant time. And I was appalled earlier this week to see Sir Geoffrey Palmer given a very limited time and actually cut off. A statesman of that stature, an individual who's devoted his life to ensuring that the pillars of the legal justice system are reflective of the community values, deserved more than that, as did a number of, I think, prominent individuals and organisations that have been highlighted by one of the select committee members already. I hope that we're not going to give the right wing a sense of priority over the, I think, the grim norm of our nation, who actually stand together shoulder to shoulder in this. People who are have devoted their lives to ensuring that the constitutional fabric of this nation is actually one that knits our communities, provides access to justice, but also enables a development framework for the inculcation of values that ensure our ongoing longevity as partners, as promised in Te Tiriti. I was part of the Waitangi Tribunal. I've heard some significant submissions. I was appalled also earlier this week to see that one of my colleagues has been so threatened by individuals that she had to bring security guards to actually make a submission to this House of Parliament. I hope that there is some censure to individuals if that has been promoted through their media exercise of scaremongering and trying to intimidate or actually prevent the Māori voice from being heard. I also saw this week an enormous outpouring of love for Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the invisibility of this in this bill, which actually means a significant amount for our firm. We've devoted 5 decades to ensuring that the truth of Te Tiriti o Waitangi guides the justice of this land and is not made irrelevant, which unfortunately this bill continues to do. One of the deepest insults is that the bill promises protection of property rights for individuals and corporations that has been denied to Māori for 185 years. Kāwanatanga, through the ACT Party, supported by National and New Zealand First, is promising primacy of property rights, requirement for consent and just compensation for the rich of today. However, they do not want to look behind today to go back to a restitutionary or compensatory outcome for Māori who've been denied the protection of their rights and interests in water. There is no suggestion this should apply retrospectively to Māori. Instead, the bill deliberately eviscerates Te Tiriti yet again. Its goal, in effect, is a new wave of colonisation to look in the property rights created over our whenua, moana, mātauranga and whakapapa. When we have demanded recognition of rangatiratanga, requirements for consent and just compensation, we have been met by war, by jail, by poverty and the denial of our sovereignty, and now by threats of violence because we dare to speak out. The protection on offer is so vague and open-ended, it could apply to anything and an individual or corporation. And let's be really, really clear. Māori are not just an individual or corporation. We have obligations as kaitiaki to this land and to all future generations that share this land with us. That is one thing as a child of a Māori and Pākehā relationship that is inculcated in my mind and my soul. There is no definition of property, the limits and its scope of application, no standards of impairment. Vagueness breeds uncertainty, risk aversion by officials, and opportunities for complaints and demands for a review of new laws and regulations by any potentially aggrieved property owners. We have argued this before the tribunal on behalf of Ngā Toki Whakarururanga as an interested party in proceedings there. Ngā Toki Whakarururanga is a Māori collective born out of the Y2522 Waitangi Tribunal into the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, a free trade agreement, and they are among the many denied a voice by the committee on this bill. They highlighted the parallels between the regulatory takings principle in the bill and protections for property rights owners under international trade and investment agreements, and the risk that breaching those principles could fuel claims for hundreds of millions of billions of dollars by foreign investors in offshore tribunals through what is known as investor states disputes or ISDS. Nice. The threat or fear of such action could have a chilling effect of making of decisions, especially to implement Te Tiriti obligations. Our claimants also provided Official Information Act documents, and I heard Professor Jane Kelsey speak with such passion about how she was denied and stonewalled about even answers to those questions relating to the bill that shows the contempt that the Deputy Prime Minister, His Honourable David Seymour, has for Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which Professor Jane Kelsey has also detailed in her submissions, and she's just one of many. I actually admire the Jane Kelseys and the Anne Salmons of the world, Pākehā allies who have devoted their academic and intellectual careers to ensuring that there is an understanding of these deep fundamental problems that must be addressed if we are to maintain the constitutional sense of united being as a nation that is so fundamental to our future as it is to our past.
Oh, Ms. Sykes, we're just at time, and I've got a couple of questioners here that I'd like
one
to
paragraph and then offer
please,
this.
Please.
Is that
yeah, so I'm just saying, wind up with some concluding remarks and then we'll go to questions.
Thank you for that. When his own officials recommended that the approach to a Te Tiriti principle could be developed in collaboration with iwi Māori, Mr. Seymour, apparently, it's virtually illegible if you actually look at the documents. Nowhere in this report is examined how a treaty principle would better deliver regulation for New Zealanders. And I want to actually end echoing the comments of one of the first speakers this week, Ani Makaire. Can I please talk to the statesmen and women of the National Party, of the New Zealand First Party? The power at this moment of time is in your hands to stop this. We urge you to look deep in your hearts and listen to all of the nation, not just a very small section of the nation, and take every effort to put a halt to this, I think, a travesty of justice that has been promoted by people who have not the support of our nation. Kia ora.
Okay, kia ora. I'm going to go to Mrs. Kapakingi. Marami now.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. E tēnā kaurua Annette, kanu te mihi kia koe, tautoko marika o au whakaaro, o kaha ki tēnei kaupapa, tēnā roho ki koe. Annette, I roti I tō mea tō kōrero o tō submission, you talk specifically about setting a dangerous precedent for further governments to rewrite legal history. So can you just talk a little bit more to that?
I use the example
in our, and events even in our.
Yeah, I use the example of property rights. Property rights is at the heart of capitalism, which is really at the core values that are being promoted by the proponents of this bill. But property rights are being narrowed from the conception, as I understanding, of the conception of it in Anglo-Saxon law, but certainly even in Maori terms as the property rights that are actively protected by Article 2 of the treaty. The fact that there is no compensation likelihood to go back to 1840 is a rewrite, I think, of fundamental precepts of property law. That is really dangerous. The putting in hands of this board the responsibility to intervene, a constitutional intervention, a mechanism that takes the power from democracy to the power that are appointed by those at whim from the executive, is absolutely undermining principles of ordinary democracy upon which this parliament has worked. Those are just two of the examples we highlight. So I'm not actually just talking about Te Tiriti, I'm actually talking about how what is being proposed is undermining the rule of law, undermining the constitutional fabric, and undermining the sense of unity that Te Tiriti promised for this nation.
Okay, thank you. We're over time, but I'm going to give Ricardo Menendez-March a question.
Thank you so much for your great submission. I wanted to ask, who do you think stands to benefit the most when it comes to this bill?
I don't want to say this in pejorative fashion, but rich white men. So, and unfortunately, nowadays there might be some women in the group, but, that's not what we thought about. Our country is born on the belief that we care for the less privileged, that we believe that we share our resources for mutual well-being, that when we hear about housing initiatives, we trust the state with the great ideas of Savage and Fraser to build the ethic of providing a shelter, a home. That's deeply rooted in Article 2 of Te Tiriti, the tino rangatiratanga of our kāinga. The privileged will take, and those that are the ordinary citizens of our society, which are the glue to our society, will be denied.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Sykes, for your presentation. And your colleague, and I've tried to be as generous as I can, and we appreciate your fullness and forthrightness this afternoon.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Bureau.
Thank you.
Well done.